This is Major. I'm on site. I'm going in.
Hello, and welcome to Film Rant. So ScarJo is back in a somewhat surprising remake of the anime classic Ghost in the Shell, directed by Rupert Sanders, who gave us Snow White and the Huntsman while he was giving Kristen Stewart the D. Yeah, that guy. It may surprise some of my regular viewers that I have in fact seen the original movie. I had to watch it in uni as I had to do a presentation on it, and I can safely say that, even though I enjoyed it, I didn't have a fucking clue what was going on. I was praying to God that this iteration of the movie would be somewhat clearer to me, as I could see the plot had potential to be great if it was just told in a way that's more digestible for a Western audience. Now, I'm not saying the original is a badly made film. Obviously there's a lot of you out there who are big fans of it, but it just didn't really explain itself well to me. But does the very white reinvention of the movie successfully deliver it to Western audiences? Well, I'm going to go into spoiler territory to answer that, so check out the movie before continuing if you don't want anything spoiled. ScarJo plays our protagonist Major, who's basically a robotic Jason Bourne, and while I liked her overall, you could say I have some major issues with her. Firstly, one of the most interesting things about her is that she's allegedly the first organism to be completely synthetic, but with a human brain. In the movie, the doctors talk about the advantages of this by saying she has the power and sustainability of a robot, but with the emotions and decision-making skills of a human. This unique combo makes her exactly that, unique. However, the movie rarely uses this in its plot. It never really explores just how someone with a human brain and cyborg body would react in certain situations. I feel like her character is wasted a bit in the context of the plot. Additionally, I thought ScarJo was like a packet of rebels with regards to her performance. You know, a bit of a mixed bag. She physically acted very well, she managed to move somewhat robotically and conveyed some emotion when the movie needed her to. However, I felt like she delivered some of her dialogue very poorly, and at times it was also robotic, which doesn't make much sense to me. She has a human brain, so surely she should talk like a human, right? If her synthetic vocal cords are anything like a human's anyway. But sometimes she's just like, yes, I will do that. What are you doing to me? Here's my best impression of Stephen Hawking. Her delivery just threw me off a little at times. One of the most interesting characters in the movie unfortunately has the least screen time. Hideo Kuz, played by Michael Pitt, is the movie's false villain in a sense. He's a guy that's been exacting revenge on Hanker Robotics for making him into a cyborg abomination. He's a failed major. I say he's the most interesting because this guy does what the movie needed to do with ScarJo. With his character it shows, even if briefly, how a completely synthetic body with a human brain in could be extremely dangerous. Robots don't seek revenge or have malice in their hearts. This guy has both, and uses his incredible synthetic abilities to get what he wants. It's a shame the movie doesn't focus on him more, because I wanted to see more of what he was capable of. As for the actual villain, Cutter, played by Peter Ferdinando, he's about as interesting as a Kings of Leon concert. He's just so generic and boring, typical a corporate baddie who continuously makes stupid and ignorant decisions and shoots his staff if they don't do as he asks. You know, most people just issue a P45, not a fucking Glock 45. I honestly couldn't care less about Cutter. Yeah, he's a bad dude, so it's sort of satisfying in the end to see him get wrecked, but as a villain he's just so lifeless. As for the two guys I thought were cool, Batu and Aramaki, played by Pulu Asbayek and Takeshi Kitano respectively, they were welcomed in my view. Both underused a little in the plot, but Batu seemed to be the sort of comic relief of the movie. I'm not sure if that's what they intended, but he seemed to be the most normal of the lot. He was very matter of fact about things and had good banter with Major, which I think didn't work too well given the tone and style of the movie, but I liked him nevertheless. As for Aramaki, that dude is just badass, man. He's ice cold. One of the main criticisms I've heard lots of people say about this movie is that it's about as boring and uneventful as Paris Hilton's autobiography, and they're mostly right. Ghost in the Shell has a runtime of 2 hours, and the first hour seems to move slower than an O.J. Simpson court case. There's probably only one or two interesting things that happen, and everything else seems like overlong filler. The movie only really picks up when Major meets Kuz, and he basically tells her that she isn't the first of her kind, and there's been many failed experiments before her, and that Hanker Robotics are evil, and blah 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 blah. You know the story, it's been done 1,000 times. From there is where the story really begins. It's where she begins to look for answers and she knows where to get them, so the story moves along a lot quicker. A lot of people say the entire movie is boring, but I disagree. The first hour is a bit dull, but I think it picks up eventually. Still, it's not a good sign when at least half of your movie is so boring it could put Billy Eichner to sleep.
Did you have sex with Paul Rudd?
Yeah,
ask.
Yes, thank you, take it.
You can have a hug, Paul Rudd.
Yeah, no, I did not say a hug. No, get away from him.
Paul Rudd, hug me.
Let's go, Paul Rudd, let's go. No.
And this is the part of the video which will result in me getting loads of abuse in the comments below, no doubt. You could argue that if you change the story a bit, it might make it less boring. Now I know some purists out there wouldn't want the original movie tampered with in the remake too much, I get that, but just hear me out. I think this movie could have cured its first hour woes if it removed the big twist in the middle that Major isn't the first of her kind, and led with that from the start. I think we should see what she was like before she got put into the shell. I wanted to see her and Kuz's relationship before all this shit went down. Then when she gets told she's the first of her kind, we know she's being lied to immediately, and we can feel for her a little more, I think. Kuz goes on his little rampage in an effort to reach out to her as well as exacting revenge. I think seeing a backstory also helps the scenes with the mother. As it currently stands, we can easily guess that Major is this lady's daughter, because why else would she be in the movie, and, you know, it's heavily alluded to that she is. But if we know for a fact that she's a mother, with absolutely no doubt because we've seen her with Major well before she got put into the shell, it would give that scene much more weight. Now I can absolutely agree that maybe that's a little too Hollywoodized for a lot of folk, and I would completely understand if the purists out there would want that movie erased from existence, but maybe making it much more formulaic would have generated more revenue. Hell, it might have just made it more interesting at the very least. It's a tough one to call, because ultimately this movie's biggest flaw is that it hasn't aged very well. The original Ghost in the Shell released in 1995, and having a movie with this kind of plot, and a good plot at that, was pretty revolutionary. It's still relatively niche in that it's only really been seen by anime fans or cinephiles, and even then not all of those people will have seen it, but I'd say it's generally considered one of the most influential movies ever made. Not long after, The Matrix released in 1999, bringing this whole kind of digital futuristic theme to a much wider audience. Again, The Matrix is considered one of the most influential movies ever made, no doubt inspired by Ghost in the Shell. Since The Matrix, there's been many movies, some successful, some flops, that have focused on these kinds of themes. Even just the general plot elements have been lifted from both movies. The Assassin's Creed movie shares many similarities with the new Ghost in the Shell in terms of characters, themes and plot, and that's why I think the remake can't really stand on its own 2 feet. Assassin's Creed was considered to be a terrible movie, and if your remake of a 1995 classic can be compared to that, which I believe it can, then you aren't in a very good place. However, you could also argue that the remake is just a more Japanese-influenced version of the Jason Bourne story. She's a weapon created by a mysterious government company and she can't remember who she is. She seeks answers and eventually ends up exacting revenge on the very people who created her. That's the Bourne trilogy in a nutshell. I guess my point is that the remake just seems so unoriginal in 2017, and it doesn't really bring anything new to the table. In 1995, this shit was brand new, which is why the original is held in such high regard. If this live-action remake came out in 1999 or somewhere around then it would have slayed the box office. Ghost in the Shell needed to take the original and really push some new, more up-to-date ideas into it. Instead, it ends up feeling staler than Coldplay's back catalogue. Another glaring issue with this movie is the bad dialogue. It can fall anywhere between being more forced than the Matrix reboot and more expositional than an episode of Arrow. Like when Major and Kuz find the mysterious hut they've been looking for and she says, "Oh, I remember now. We lived here as runaway children before they took us away." No shit, Sherlock. I can appreciate that this movie is meant to be more accessible than the original, which I've already said for me was a bit convoluted and difficult to follow, so I get why there's some exposition, but it gets to the point where it's patronising. It goes way too far. Some of the dialogue just flat out doesn't make sense to, and it doesn't help that, like I said before, ScarJo occasionally delivers some of her lines poorly. Nearly every review I've seen of this movie has criticised the bad dialogue, and I have to agree. There's also one scene in the movie that stuck out to me because it was just really odd. No, I'm not going to talk about when she fights the fucking spider tank or when she encounters the creepy spider geisha. It's the scene where Major meets her mother for the first time. She's walking along and encounters the cat she's seen in her visions, which, given what we already know, we can assume is her cat. Then the mother just comes out and is like, "Eee, the cat likes you, Howie in pet and have a cuppa." I was like, wait a minute, do you even know who ScarJo is? You've just invited this random woman into your house who could may well have been trying to abduct your cat. Not only that, she proceeds to tell this complete stranger about her runaway daughter when she glances over to her room. It's an important scene because obviously it shows us Major's roots and we can clearly decipher that this is her mother, and I can appreciate the tragic sentiment of the scene, but it's just delivered in a very poor way. All it took was a little writing at the start of the scene to have Major introduce herself to the woman and manage to get herself invited inside. I think the lady thinks that Major is somebody else who was meant to come over and see her, like a social worker or something, as she says, "You'll visit again, won't you?" But it's never really made clear and the scene just seems odd. As for the technical side, this movie is visually fantastic. It is shot beautifully with lush, vivid colours and a colour grade that just makes them all pop. What surprised me was how good some of the shots were recreated from the original. The tall apartment complexes, the building dives, and even Major's creation. They all looked fantastic. This all goes hand in hand with amazing special effects. The visuals are without doubt the movie's strongest elements, and it's almost worth watching just to gaze at a picture that is sexier than Baywatch Hasselhoff. Ghost in the Shell is a movie that I can compare to Assassin's Creed in my opinion of it. It's a movie that has some good ideas and a plot that has the potential to be very smart, but it just tries way too hard to be edgy and ends up a bit of a mess. It doesn't know if it wants to stick to its roots or become more accessible, and it fails to walk a tightrope between both sides. Maybe that's a good thing in a way though. As I've said, I don't think the original plot would really be all that great in today's market anyway. It's half boring, half good, with a wobbly performance from Scarlett Johansson, and all the other good supporting characters don't get that much screen time. The villain is boring and generic, and the dialogue can be more patronising than "Do they know it's Christmas?" I can only assume Bob Geldof wrote the script of this thing. However, Ghost in the Shell is a pleasure to watch from a visual standpoint, and I did enjoy the final hour or so once the story got moving. I could push past the bad dialogue and wonky performances because there was stuff actually happening. I'm not sure how fans of the original will feel with this movie, but as a casual I think you'll either love it or hate it. It can be too weird for some people and too boring for others, or maybe even a combination of both. I didn't mind it though, and I had fun in the end, so I wouldn't dissuade anybody from watching it. Check it out if you're intrigued. This movie really is what you make of it. Ghost in the Shell gets 3 frames out of 5. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Film Rant.
They did not save your life. They stole it.